Alright guys, I'm just gonna share a little bit about my journey through my first actually finished game. As you can see, we're in a new set. I never had an old set, however this is technically a new set. We got Apple IIgs, also known as
Ultra Beast Gaming Setup.
We got Broken Bass Drum Pedal number 25, Broken Lava Lamp, and Jurassic World Lunchbox. I know, it's pretty epic. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention Dora Kitchen. I'm an idiot. We got Dora Kitchen right here. Future Reese, show a clip of me getting Dora Kitchen for Christmas.
Thank you.
What is that? Yes! Or Dora?
So my first idea was that I wanted to make a puzzle game that was grid-based. Now that's all I had, and I just started developing. So the first thing I did was create a grid, pictured here. I just created DS grid. I just created the DS grid and the it's not a DS grid. Actually, it's an MP grid. I've been talking incorrectly this past few minutes. So after I did that, I created the player sprites. It took me a while to create them. I'll show you a picture of my game ideas thing, or the actual ideas that I started making. And one of their criteria was that I had to have the player with 8 directional sprites. So that's the first thing I did. So my next idea was that because it was grid-based, I was thinking about things that were made of grid tiles. So the first thing I thought of was a keyboard, and I was sort of inspired by a game called Keygeon, made for the GMTK Game Jam in 2017. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool, I want to do something like that. It ended up nowhere near being as cool as Keygeon from the GMTK Game Jam in 2017. It was a pretty cool idea, and I was like, okay, I need to do something with the keyboard. So I decided on making the walls optional, where you would have to press keys on the keyboard to add and subtract walls from their grid spaces. Also, my original plan was to make it so that the player had to cross certain points and then finally get to an exit, but I decided that that wasn't very fun. I never actually coded it, but I decided that it wasn't fun before I started coding it. So I started coding in the keyboard things, and it took me a while to get everything implemented, with like choosing the character and the creation code in the room. But that was all easy enough. The problem was getting it to remove the cell from the grid and add it back into the grid after you press the key again. Alright, I think I've got it working. Okay, so as you can see, we can't go to this D key right here. But if we clear all of them, now we can. And now we can't go back to our starting position. The only one that doesn't work right now is space, but I can get it to work in the same way that I got the other ones to work. So I personally think this is a pretty cool idea. The story here is he's actually an orc trying to find artifacts, which are going to be things that you collect in the dungeons. And this is his health bar right here. I'm going to add enemies with the same pathfinding as the player. It didn't actually take that long. I'm overstating it a bit. But there were some problems, especially with the spacebar, as you'll see next. Okay, I've come across yet another problem. We can't go onto the spacebar, because the way I'm doing it, you can only break blocks that are 1 unit, but the spacebar is 9 units, making it impossible to delete every single cell. I'll figure it out. Okay, I think I fixed it. Moment of truth here. Oh, yep, I fixed it. So basically what I did was I made it so it cleared and added a rectangle instead of just 1 unit. Here's the code that does that. And then, after all of that, first level was basically there. We had the player being able to move across the map as long as the thing was empty. Even the spacebar worked. That's what I call pretty epic. But it was missing something, you know. The enemies, yeah, you probably predicted that. Now, when I was thinking of ideas, not only was I thinking about the keyboard, obviously, but I was playing Morrowind at the time, Elder Scrolls 3, and I was like, wow, I really like this game. I want to implement something similar to that in my game that I'm creating in 48 hours. So I wanted to create a bunch of enemies that were like fantasy characters, like, you know, you got your goblins, you got your skeletons, your orcs. But then I was like, okay, the main character is an orc trying to travel to a dungeon, so like maybe not. I don't know. And also 8 directional spriting was mandatory for every enemy. I didn't feel like creating 8 sprites for every enemy, so I just duplicated the player sprites, and then I colored them red. And the game actually uses all the colors in the game are part of the Pico 8 palette, or at least I tried to make them part of it, but not all of them are. There's actually a technical reason why. Custom color limits in the sprite editor for GameMaker, they only have 8 colors, or I mean, they only have 16 colors, and I needed 32. Okay, so I've added an enemy into the game, and I set it so he pathfinds, or he tries to move to the player 2 times every second, and if he can, he will. Alright, so here we are, and as you can see, he can't pathfind to the player, but we can try do this, and will he do it? Is he gonna pathfind to the player? Alright, I guess not. Alright, I think I got it working, so yep, there we go. I also added artifacts into the game around this time, but I don't actually have footage of me adding artifacts in the game. So after I added artifacts, I started work on the second level. Now, I needed something extra, an extra game mechanic, because I couldn't just have walls and then a single enemy in the game. That would be extremely dumb. So, I added spikes. I added the spikes because I felt that attacking didn't really fit the game, so I wanted to make the end goal to actually just trap all the enemies into walking into spikes. But the problem was pathfinding. You see, if I make the spikes a block, that means the enemies can't travel into the spikes. If I make it not a block, the player can walk through the spikes and then die. So the solution was simple. Just add it to the grid before the player's path is calculated, and remove it right after. The code is here. I thought this would be slow, but it really wasn't that slow, and it didn't make much of a difference. So this is the first 2 levels at this point in development. So I actually didn't record any footage after this until yesterday. So there's a large gap between builds. So I'll just provide a brief summary on what I added. So the first thing I added was a red switch and a yellow switch that activated or deactivated red and yellow walls respectively. At the end of the game, there's actually a blue and a green switch and a blue and a green wall. I just added those. I just spanked them onto the last level just to make it look like it had more going on than it actually did. The blue switch is actually completely superfluous. It just adds an extra step. So I might delete it, but I think it looks good with the green and the yellow and the red. So I'm probably not going to do that. I also added lighting. Lighting was big. I added a torch, and I made it so the switches actually emit light when they're on. I added lighting at the same time as, or well, technically right after the switches. The next thing I added was pads, red and yellow pads that also worked on walls. The next thing I added was death pads, and I just wanted something that was a little bit more tactical than spikes, because like you can't do anything with spikes. I mean, it's painfully obvious what you're supposed to do with the spikes. So I thought maybe the death pads would help add some tactility. And so I made it so you can right click on the death pads and move them to a spot next to where they were in the beginning. And I mean, you can try and move it anywhere, but it'll go back to the starting point. It's pretty cool, and enemies just die. But the thing is, the player can also die from the death pads. Because I wanted to make it different than just like spikes that you can move. I wanted to make it something that like you'd have to account for. And I didn't really like do anything with that in the actual game. There are no levels that utilize that mechanic. It's kind of pointless. I could have just made it so that they were basically just spikes that you can move, but I wanted to make it so the player's pathfinding actually goes over the death pads if you're not careful. What else did I add? Oh, level select. I added a level select. That was at the very end. I also added sound effects, and I made like a short little 12-bar loop of music, just a piano. And I added some ambient noise in the background, just like a rumble mixed with wind, so that's pretty epic. All the sound effects are like retro, so they sound like they could be run on an NES. A couple minor things, I changed the exit to a stair and added some footstep sound effects, which actually took a long time to get right, the volume and the rate at which they're played. So I made the main menu, I just called it Raster. I know I had another game called Raster that I made a video on that's currently unlisted. I actually deleted all my projects on itch.io except for the Phantom Knight. So yeah, go check out the link in the description. And I'll leave you to this epic picture of velociraptors. We're not gonna talk about that.